Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the dugout. My name is Ben. I'm joined along with Justin. Justin, how are we today?
So far, so good, man. Excited to hop into some free agent news.
Yeah, so obviously the big one, Yoshinobu Yamamoto to the Dodgers. The Dodgers are building a super team over there in LA. Biggest deal in pitcher history
Yeah.
for someone who hasn't pitched in a major league game yet. What do we think about that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Dodgers are all in. I think at this point, Dave Roberts I'm sure he's excited, but I'm sure also he knows that if he doesn't take home a championship next year, that he's not going to have a job after that.
100%. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah, hasn't thrown a pitch in the major leagues yet. Was an absolute stud, in the Japanese league. He won the equivalent of the Cy Young over there three times, MVP. Um, so the guy can pitch, but yeah, the Dodgers are throwing out a lot of money. They got Teoscar Hernandez that they were just able to kind of acquire as well, adding another All Star to the lineup, which it's hard to see. I mean, especially now with Yamamoto and pitching has been addressed a little bit with him. Obviously, man, the Dodgers are pretty stacked. If they don't take it all next year, it's going to be something that it's going to be a lot of ruffling of feathers there, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, the Dodgers window seems obviously they're going all in on this on their window right now. They added Teoscar for 1 year, 23.5 million. I think they're paying him a lot. They deferred a lot of it, I think. Which obviously smart. A 1 year, 23.5 million contract is almost unheard of. That's pretty
Yeah,
crazy. Obviously Yamamoto, 12 years, 25 million. They're only paying him 5 million this year, 10 million next year, 12 million in 2026. And then after that, it goes up 26, 29, 28. So yeah, it's very evident that they've kind of understood and realized that this is their window to win. We've obviously talked about previously, their lack of success with the roster they have. Obviously, the 2020 World Series, and people have their opinions on that, but their window's open. And to get a player like Yamamoto, I don't think a lot of people realize that it's not just the 325 million they're paying him. They had to pay an extra 50 million to the Oryx Buffaloes, which is a crazy amount of money as well. Obviously, kind of gets washed out in the mix of 325 million. Doesn't seem very crazy, but just paying to get the guy and then having to pay the guy, it's a lot of money. They're obviously very committed. Yamamoto, obviously, incredible player. Um, but again, it's a crazy deal for a player, no matter how good in Japan he was, who hasn't thrown a single pitch or even stepped on a major league field.
yeah, it's a lot of money to your point, for essentially a rookie, right? I mean, like I saw updated like rookie of the year standings, and he's favored to win, but it puts in perspective just how much. Yeah, he's
Mm-hmm.
never thrown a pitch in the MLB before, and so to drop 325 million, yeah, they've kind of set up his contract where first couple of years aren't necessarily going to be a lot of out of pocket expense, but at the same time, I mean, yeah, it's a gamble in that way. If it works out and they take home World Series, I think they're going to be happy because obviously, as you alluded to, all their chips are pushed in for right now. And I'm sure Otani had an effect on getting Yamamoto there because I know the Giants were very sad to not land Yamamoto, and they had a very similar deal on the table. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see. I mean, they have to be the favorites. I think they realize, yeah, their windows now. Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, those guys aren't going to get any younger.
No.
For them to both be in top three in MVP voting, the time is now. And they got some young players as well. But I think ultimately they're like, hey, if we can get everything going, get a championship going, especially after last year, I think. Obviously the D-backs went to the World Series, but getting bounced by them I think was a surprise to almost everybody. I'm assuming the Dodgers as well in that regard, and I don't think they want to see that again. So, like I
No.
said, if they don't get there, man, I don't know what's going to happen there. I know for sure Dave Roberts might be looking for a new job, but ultimately the roster shakeup at that point would be interesting to see. But yeah, I mean, they have to be the favorites with the roster that they have now, and assuming Yamamoto is going to be at least productive. Obviously, I don't know if he's going to go out there and win the Cy Young year one. I heavily doubt that, but you never know. But as long as he's a productive starter, I mean, ultimately, I think at this point for them, that's really all they're looking for.
Yeah, and I think the even scarier part is now just with what they've added with Glasnow and Yamamoto. They already had a pretty solid rotation.
Yeah,
They have Bobby Miller, who's super young, obviously not paying him a lot at the very moment. Another guy, Emmett Sheehan, who came up for them and pitched very well. Um, Gonsolin had his contract year, had a great year, wasn't very good after that. Still a very usable and decent starter in the major leagues. Obviously, you have Walker Buehler as well. So I think the scary part here is, the Dodgers have been linked to guys like Clase. The Guardians could definitely use some starting pitching. And you get arguably the second best closer in baseball behind Felix Bautista. You could even argue that he is the best closer in baseball ahead of Bautista.
yeah,
So if you let a team like that, leverage some luxury resources on their end to get even better, that's a pretty scary thought because they don't really have uh, a marquee closer at the moment. I guess I'd say. Obviously, they
yeah,
have Bruce Gratterall, great reliever. I don't think Trinan's there anymore. So, yeah, I mean, the Dodgers, they have a bunch of pieces to play with. They obviously have a lot of young prospects as well. Their farm system isn't too bad. Guys like Michael Bush, his name's been in a lot of trade scenarios over the past couple of years.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a pretty scary thought to think about the luxuries the Dodgers can afford at the moment. Obviously, they're committed over $1 billion to both Shohei and Yamamoto, and then to even think that guys like Roki Sasaki next year, already linked to the Dodgers. The Dodgers have already shown interest in him.
yeah,
Murakami is going to be coming over as well. The Dodgers are probably going to end up needing a third baseman after Max Muncy.
yeah,
Muncy's definitely out of his prime at this point. So it's and then you mix in Shohei and Yamamoto already being there. It's a pretty scary prospect to think that the Dodgers are just building Team Japan in the United States. And obviously the best parts of Team Japan at that too. So I don't know, man. It's the Dodgers are building a dynasty. They're building a super team. Obviously, I think the question is how sustainable can it be with the amount of money you're putting down and the commitment you've made to two major players. If you want to add Freeman and Betts, that's four. Um, it's a lot. I mean, we're getting close to $2 billion between those four players, and let's say they go get one of Roki Sasaki or Munetaka Murakami. You're looking at a $2 billion big five.
sure.
So that's a scary prospect. Obviously, baseball works a lot differently than other sports, and if you can afford it, you can afford it. Um, what are your thoughts on how this is for baseball? Obviously, baseball. I think I've always made the case that it's the hardest sport to build a super team because it doesn't. You can build a super team, but it doesn't matter as much as if you're in the NBA or the NFL. There's a lot more variables to the game of baseball itself, just bare bones baseball, than just a super team. So yeah, let's hear it.
Yeah, man. I mean, yeah, it's ultimately, I think, to your point, it's very unlike, I mean, even in the NFL or the NBA, where it's a lot harder to build a super team. There's a lot more games, a lot more players factored in. Obviously the money, when you start talking about $2 billion, it's pretty hard to fathom, especially if they start going after the other Japanese talent next year. This reminds me, kind of old school Steinbrenner Yankees, where it
Yeah,
was like, I'm going to pay anything I can to get to a World Series. And as long as we win, we're fine, right? And so
hmm
I think ultimately that's like their perspective as well, because obviously LA is a huge market. The Dodgers brand is insane, and especially
right,
adding a lot of Japanese talent, going to become even more international than they already
exactly.
are.
Yep.
But I think ultimately, to your point, building a super team is not easy. I think that's why you see the Dodgers continuing to try to add talent because for the most part they had a very, very good lineup last year that they paid a lot of money for, and the Diamondbacks still found their way in the World Series with
Exactly.
a
Right.
pretty minimal salary on their team.
hmm
So again, I think, if you're a Dodgers fan or, in Dodgers ownership or part of the organization, if you win a World Series this year, I think for them it's 100% worth it. And I think ultimately, if they, add some Japanese talent next year and they win another one, then it's like, wow, the Dodgers are geniuses. If they go out this year and they fall flat, then people are going to be like, well, that was idiotic. And I think that's the game you play when you start dumping a lot of money into a team. But ultimately, I think, again, I think you nailed it in the sense that building a super team in baseball is not as easy as people would think. Especially with as many games, injuries. I mean, any given day, you could have your Cy Young pitcher on the mound and somebody that you've never heard of on the other side can get a W. So, to me, I don't necessarily think it changes much in the sense of what we've seen before in the past. I think those super teams with the Yankees and the Red Sox back in the day that were competing for free agents consistently, and that was always super exciting. But at that time, you still had teams like the Oakland A's who had no payroll at all, and they're still competing for
Yeah.
for playoff spots and stuff like that. So that's a competitive balance that I think baseball has over any other sport. And in a way, it's kind of fun to look at these prospective lineups and say, wow, I can't believe that's going to be a real lineup for the Dodgers this year. So I think it's kind of always been something that's been done in baseball, and I think ultimately, we'll have to see if it actually works for the Dodgers this year or not. This episode is brought to you by HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. If you love baseball, you know how important it is to have a good strategy, a solid lineup, and a winning attitude. That's why HelloFresh is the perfect choice for busy fans who want to enjoy delicious, home-cooked meals without spending hours in the kitchen. HelloFresh delivers fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and easy-to-follow recipes right to your door. Whether you're cheering for your favorite team, hosting a watch party, or just looking for a satisfying meal, HelloFresh has your bases covered. So you've resolved to actually sit down and eat dinner around the table, but what do you do about those nights when your schedule is packed? Turn to HelloFresh's lineup of quick and easy meals, including their 15-minute recipes designed to help minimize mealtime stress. Don't let recipe boredom strike you out, because HelloFresh has more options than ever before. Dig into their biggest menu yet with over 45 dinner options to choose from weekly and even more market add-on items that suit any lifestyle. Their when steak met potatoes should be changed to when my taste buds met home plate, because it is an absolute home run. It was the perfect mix of flavor and fun. The gluten-free goodness was a huge plus as well, for sure going for seconds. So what are you waiting for? Go to HelloFresh.com/dugoutfree and use code dugoutfree for free breakfast for life. One breakfast item per box while subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life at HelloFresh.com/dugoutfree with code dugoutfree.
Yeah, obviously, as baseball fans, like it's very exciting for us just to be able to watch a team with that much talent in the same lineup.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the issue comes from the salary cap, and people argue that the Royals wouldn't be able to do this, the A's wouldn't be able to do this, the Reds wouldn't be able to do this because they can't afford to, and that may seem unfair to people. My argument to that though is we've seen the Royals win a World Series in the past decade. If you want to look at a small market team like the Hornets, I guess, in the NBA, when's the last time they were in the finals? If you want to go to the NFL, like the Texans haven't been in a Super Bowl in God knows ever, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's just kind of the beautiful part of baseball is, again, like as you alluded to, you have a very young and cheap team in the Arizona Diamondbacks, and they beat probably one of the top 3 most talented teams in baseball last year. And I think that's kind of just a testament to how the game is, and that's kind of been my whole thing with the salary cap, and not having one, is that you can build the best team possible in baseball, but the ball is not going to fall your way every time, every game. In the NBA, you can build the best team you possibly can. Your guys are going to hit shots. There's not to say there's no variables into the sport of basketball, but you can square up a baseball 10 out of 10 times. You're not going to get 10 hits. In the NBA, you shoot 10 perfect jumpers, they're going to go in. It's just kind of how the ball rolls in these sports, and I think that's what, obviously, there's a level of disparity between talent, of course, and if you put the Dodgers up against the Athletics in a 10-game series, they're probably going to win 8 or 9 of them. But especially once you get to October, anything can happen. I mean, we've seen it before. We've seen the Yankees be up 3-1 over the Red Sox. We've seen just we've seen a lot of underdogs come out on top. And we've also seen the Tampa Bay Rays. Like on the flip side, if you want to argue against against not having a salary cap, we've seen a very cheap team like the Tampa Bay Rays be the best regular season team in baseball all year, all 162 games. You get in the playoffs, and it doesn't help. No one shows up.
Yeah.
There's no energy there. They can never make it over the hump. You get a smaller team. Not that Arizona is a small market team, but it's smaller team, younger team. Arizona baseball hasn't been huge in the past decade. Uh,
Yeah.
but you get fans that show up to those games, passionate fan base, and they come out on top, make a World Series. Obviously, lost to the Rangers, but it's just a different game, and I don't think that what the Dodgers are doing should be viewed as hurting. Obviously, I think the issue with this is we praise the Braves for how well they've built. I'm not going to call them a dynasty yet, but a dynasty level roster.
Yeah.
With all the young stars and paying as little as they possibly can by doing it early. I don't think there's anything wrong with the Dodgers doing it now. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the same idea, but you're buying players that are proven. The Braves, are buying players they were hoping to be proven, and obviously, all credit to their developmental, side of the organization. It's worked out great. The Dodgers have done that with some players on their roster now, but they're going all in to buy proven players to win a championship, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. We've seen it not to this extent, but we've seen it, in the past with a lot of teams. Obviously, the Yankees have done it before. Even the Rangers this year did it.
Yeah.
And then, little segue into here, the Red Sox have done it with Chris Sale, who is now an Atlanta Brave.
Yep. Yeah, I saw. I mean, speaking of deferred money too, I saw. So the Sox are paying 17 mil. I think they're deferring 10, and I think the Braves are
Yeah,
on the hook for like 500K. So,
yeah,
I mean, for them, on paper, you look at his salary initially, and you're like, okay, well, yeah, that's a pretty big trade for them. And I think ultimately, man, if I get Chris Sale for $500,000, I'm taking that deal all day, every day, especially for the Braves, where you just kind of interject a veteran, former All Pro, into that pitching rotation amongst all of that young talent. Matt Olson having arguably an MVP type season last year that I think kind of went under the radar because Ronald Acuna
100%.
Jr. had, an absolutely terror of a year. So, I think, yeah, giving them another lefty starter, amongst that rotation, amongst that, that lineup that they have out there, I think, that's going to be one that we potentially look back, come October and be like, wow, this was kind of a veteran move there, in terms of getting somebody on the cheap that's really going to be productive for that team.
Yeah, and I think it was a win-win. Obviously, the Red Sox covered a need. And needed a person to play second base, a very young
Yeah.
prospect. Uh, you know, I don't want to say Grissom's unproven, but he's better than trading for someone who has never stepped on a major league diamond yet.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, Sox fans are looking forward to Marcelo Meyer, Nick York, whoever it may be. The farm is loaded, but Grissom's been up. Grissom showed flashes. He's been doing it for a little longer than those other guys, and I think it's a very exciting prospect for both sides because the Braves just fill out the rotation even more. Chris Sale is a number 4. One, there's no pressure on Chris Sale to have to throw 160 innings a year, which he hasn't done in God knows how long. Um, and then obviously, if Chris Sale gets hurt, it's not that big of a deal for the Braves.
Yeah.
And it's not like they're giving up Grissom in a spot where they need to Grissom. They weren't taking away from their immediate impact roster. Obviously, he's blocked by Albies and Arcia. He was blocked by
Yeah.
Swanson before, so I think it was a good trade for both sides. I think they both got something they need. Um, I mean, yeah, and again, come October, Chris Sale could look like a huge piece for that Braves team, whether it's out of the bullpen or deep in the rotation. And I think that's something that's kind of caught up with them in the past few years is not having um, some pitching depth as they get deeper into the playoffs, especially with the injuries they've had. So, and then they went and signed him too to a 2-year, $30-something million deal, which I thought maybe was premature just
Yes.
based on what we've seen Chris Sale do for the past 4 years. But again, just like the Dodgers, the Red Sox, you got to make those moves to win a World Series, and I think um, that's it's gonna come full circle again because I think it's another one of those moves to the Braves that you move a young prospect you really like for a frontline pitcher that's gonna help you deep in October.
Yeah, I think you nailed it in the sense too that I think it is a win-win. I mean, ultimately, because if you're the Sox and where you're at right now, and you're kind of, you do have a lot of young talent that's going to make their way up. Having Sale, you know, be one of your aces, even if he gets back to Chris Sale form, doesn't do a whole lot for you now. Which is, you get over Grissom, who, to your point, super talented. It's not like the Braves couldn't have used him. They just have an interjection of talent in their middle infield that is kind of blocking his ability to get up. So I think ultimately it's going to be a solid move for both teams. I agree in the sense that I was surprised to see that they signed him right away, but when we talk about how different teams do different things, I think that's a part of what the Braves can do because they said, all right,
Hmm.
cool, we got a lot of young talent. We've locked up a lot of young talent over the next 7 years. Their contracts that's not are crazy in terms of how everybody's kind of locked up, so it gives them a little bit of flexibility and being able to make some short term deals. And in terms of what they have on their roster, I mean they're pretty set. So it allows them to go out, try to get somebody, see if it works. And then to your point, if it doesn't, I don't think if the Braves lose in the NLCS or something like that, I don't think anybody's saying, well, yeah, if they had Chris Sale, this was that was the thing that,
Yeah.
really hurt them. So I think ultimately it's kind of a win-win. And I'm sure for Sale, it's going to be kind of nice to get back to some competitive baseball. And I think for the Red Sox, a couple of years, we would be talking about all those prospects and Grissom right at the center of it is,
I hope so. Yeah.
why they're successful. Yeah, I know you're hoping for that too. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think for both sides, right? If Grissom pans out, heck yeah, for the Red Sox. If Sale does anything for the Braves, heck yeah, for Atlanta. And sometimes those trades end up being where neither one of those things happen. But I think
Right.
ultimately on paper right now, it looks like a good trade for both sides.
Yeah. And just moving on with free agency, there's still, I think we kind of get washed out with the big signings, but there's still a lot of players left in free agency.
A ton.
Obviously headlining, we have Stroman, Cody Bellinger, Justin Turner still out there,
Snell.
Josh Hader, Matt Chapman, Reese Hoskins, Jorge Soler, Jordan Montgomery, Blake Snell. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot of players, lot of quality players still left in free agency, and it's kind of I would say I think this is probably one of the faster moving MLB free agencies we've seen. I think a lot of times these big name guys wait till close to spring training, like Bryce Harper a couple
Yeah.
years ago. That was a spring training. Machado spring training. Um, this one got moving pretty quick. I mean, Shohei obviously wanted to make his decision very fast, and that got the ball rolling for everybody. Um, but yeah, I'm kind of interested to see, when the pieces are going to fall. Obviously, like a guy like Cody Bellinger, like where's Cody Bellinger going to realistically end? Is he going to be back with the Cubs? Is he going to be a Giant? I would like him to be a Red Sox. I don't think it'll happen, but that obviously be a good addition. So again, like Josh Hader, that Josh Hader's picking up steam. Josh Hader wants a lot of money.
Yeah.
Um, Matt Chapman as well. Like Matt Chapman's a platinum glove award winner. He's showing that he's can be a good hitter. Whether he can put the pieces together, that's questionable. But you're still paying for a frontline defender, and obviously gets looked over a lot. But a fielder like that, over the course of 162 games, can provide immense value to a team, regardless of how many homers or what he hits for the year. So
Yeah.
Blake Snell's an interesting one too. The Yankees picking up steam with him, Jordan Montgomery as well. I don't know. I honestly don't have any temperature for where Jordan Montgomery's going to end up.
Yeah.
Soler, I think Soler is going to end up a Red Sox. I think that's going to be a great fit at Fenway Park. So
Yeah. Yeah, him
in
hitting those
short, let's do
Soler
it.
bombs over
Yeah,
over the monster there would be pretty awesome actually just to see that. But yeah, a lot of interesting. I think you said something that I think is to your point, free agency in baseball can sometimes lag a little bit, and then as we get closer to everybody reporting, that's when we start to see signings kind of dropping in. But I think with a guy like Hader or even Snell, right? We're talking about the NL Cy Young from last year. I think you see their price tags and then you see their ages, and then I think you see deals that
exactly.
have been made over the last couple of the years. And I think teams are hesitant on some of that stuff with it, with
Yep.
like Shohei. I know we talked about Yamamoto not being overly proven, but I mean, those guys were obviously the top guys. And I think that's why we saw that bidding war right away, especially, Otani kind of expedited that with saying that he wanted to make a move early on. And so, yeah, Montgomery, I know obviously the Rangers, Yankees. I think there's just a lot of teams right now that want to add some talent, especially pitching like that, left-handed pitching.
Hmm.
But, you look at Snell, 31 years old. Yeah, he won the Cy Young with the Rays. Then he had a couple of, I would argue, pretty mediocre years with the Padres. And then his last contract here, he does what he's supposed
Yeah.
to do. He tears it up, wins the Cy Young. But I think if you're a team and you're like 31-year-old pitcher, wants $200 million, I don't know who I'm going to get. To me, it's not overly surprising that he's not necessarily on a roster quite yet. Hader's obviously a stud, but when you're talking about that much money for even if you looking at an all-star closer, I mean, it's just these teams like we talk about with the Dodgers, they're down to spend as much as possible, but
Right.
certainly in the league, not everybody is like that. So you start to kind of eliminate certain options at that point, depending on kind of the contracts that you're looking for. Um, Chapman, I think I mean, ultimately defense, I think is obviously so underrated in this league that we have now, where it's like, home runs and some pitching, and that's about it. But you really, at the hot corner especially, I don't think, and if Chapman can give you the 2025 home runs that he's been proven to be able to do, I think he's underrated. And Bellinger, former, MVP, man, I think, and he's still relatively young, honestly. People kind of forget that as well. But I think
Yeah.
his ability
He's
to
only
be able
28.
to, yeah, 28 years old, he can play. I know he's probably going to end up at first or, DH, depending on where he goes, but also has outfield ability as well. So, I'll be curious to see where he goes. I think a lot of people that maybe don't follow baseball as close, but didn't realize how great of a season he had for the Cubs last year. So that would be interesting to see. I know you're obviously rooting for him to be a Red Sox. I think that would be awesome. I imagine, I've heard the reports about him maybe even going to New York, and him with that
Yeah.
short right porch would be pretty lethal, it seems like. But, as we talked about in our last episode, I don't even know where you'd think about playing him. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see because there's only so many teams that want to shell out that kind of money for these guys.
Yeah, I mean, just looking through some of these, market like Rhys Hoskins has a market value of $21 million. I'm not paying Rhys Hoskins $21 million a
No,
year. I mean, that's absolutely out of this world. I mean, Stroman's at 15, Clayton Kershaw at 37. No team would give Clayton Kershaw $37 million a year right now, obviously.
no.
But yeah, I mean, there's some interesting one like Jock Peterson. I mean, that's a interesting bat that could end up somewhere.
Yeah,
Maybe not in an everyday role, but maybe for a contender like the Phillies, get another lefty power bat. That one I probably doubt would happen just based off of the amount of lefties they have. But he's kind of intriguing. He's shown that he can continually hit. Cody Bellinger. I think the issue here with a lot of the big name guys, right? Like there's something that sticks out that scares you. And I think that's why teams are having so hard shelling out money. And that combined with the fact that we've now had record-setting contracts, it resets the market. And so
yeah,
now Blake Snell's like, well, Yamamoto just got $325 million. I won an MLB Cy Young. He's never pitched in an MLB game. I want my money. And,
yeah,
does Blake Snell probably deserve some money? Sure. 2-time Cy Young winner. He's worth it. Has he lived up to what he wants? Maybe not on a consistent basis. He's shown that he can be that. But again, like at age 31, is a team really going to shell out the money for 7 to 9 years that he wants? Like, it's just not something I'm willing to commit to. The same goes for Jordan Montgomery. Obviously, Montgomery's not, asking for nearly as much as Blake Snell is, but, we've seen him be very bad, especially in New York.
yeah,
Obviously, so the big game argument maybe not as much as a factor now because he pitched so well in the World Series last year, but he struggled in New York, and we've seen a lot of pitchers struggle, a lot of players just in general struggle in New York, go to a different team and have great success, and I think it just comes down to being in New York. It's a very demanding city, very demanding fan base. So how well would he be able to handle a team like that? They have all these questions. Cody Bellinger, again, like incredible season last year. But he's had 3-4 years where he's been a non-factor. If you want to dive into the analytics even more, I'm sure teams have concerns with his expected batting average is a lot lower than his actual. So it's tough. There's so many variables with these guys. There's no as many good names as there are on this list. There's no clear cut. I'm willing to commit this money. Marcus Stroman, another guy. I'm not willing to fully commit to what you want just based off the concerns I have. Reese
Yeah.
Hoskins again, coming off injury. How well is he going to come back? Jorge
Yeah.
Soler. Like, what you're going to get from Jorge Soler. You're going to get 25 to 30 homers, but you're going to strike out a crap ton and
Yeah.
hit in the 250s. Obviously, Soler had probably one of his better years of his career outside of his 40 home run seasons, but just as a complete hitter average and whatnot. But again, it's a contract year, and we've seen guys on contract years. It's a real thing. Contract years are definitely a real thing.
Oh yeah.
Players play out a lot higher than they should. So it's tough. I think it's hard to forecast a lot of these guys. There's still a lot of quality relievers too out here. Adam Ottavino could definitely go to a contender and be a good arm out of the pen. Mark Melancon, even at his age, could still be somewhat usable. Chapman, another guy. I don't know how much a team would be willing to give Chapman now,
Yeah.
but he kind of revived himself a little bit in Texas. His velo was very down in New York. Comes to Texas and he's throwing 104 again. So
Yeah.
again, it's another guy that a team might get behind. So I don't know. There's some big question marks here. I don't know if Kershaw is going to end up back on the Dodgers. Clayton Kershaw not on the Dodgers would be very interesting. I think he would just retire.
Yeah, I think so. I think that would be the move, or at least that would be. I mean, yeah, I couldn't imagine him really anywhere else. And I think, like we talked about, even if he doesn't get that 37 million, I mean, who? I know Kershaw's been obviously serviceable. He's been an amazing pitcher for a
Yeah.
long time. And it was sad to see just over all the years of how dominant he was, like his performance in the playoffs there. And I know that's not obviously how he wanted to go out, but seeing him on any other roster there, I don't know. It would be to me very similar. Like when Madison Bumgarner pitched for the Diamondbacks and didn't really do much, where it was just like,
Right.
man, is more of a name than a talent. So I think, I think I would see him retiring before I'd see him going back to the Dodgers. But also him on the Dodgers right now doesn't make a whole lot of sense either, outside of like a feel good roster piece, I guess. But I think I think what you said is spot on, man, in the sense that every one of those guys has something that you're a little bit leery about, and I think like obviously it's been this way for forever in baseball. But you look at somebody like Anthony Rendon for the Angels, who they're just the amount of money that they've paid that guy for the amount of games that he's played, and it's just like when there's risk there and you want to bring in one of the top free agents, but the market has been reset and that's what they're asking for at that time. If you're not a big money market team, you can't afford something like that where you're paying some guy to not play for you or to
Mm-hmm.
play for you and not really do much in the sense of being successful there. So yeah, I'm curious. I know there's a few, big market teams. I know the Giants have been looking to add somebody big, seemingly this whole offseason and just have not been able to capitalize, even since last offseason when they went after Judge. So, maybe expecting them to make a move, but I think it'll be interesting to see. I feel like we'll probably get a few teams that will give some of these guys some of the big money just to bring them in. And then I think we'll probably see a lot of prove it deals for some of these other guys, these that very, Teoscar Hernandez esque in the sense of like, here's pretty good amount of money for 1 year, maybe a club option or player option for the next year, and go from there. But it's you say all those names, and it's kind of crazy to think that they're not on a roster. But as we spoke about as well, as we get closer to spring training, I'm sure that'll obviously start to change too. Teams starting to look at their lineups, maybe not as stacked as they want it to be, and willing to shell out some money then versus now.
Yeah, and I mean we've seen it before too. Like a bad contract can set an organization back years. In the case of let's say Pablo Sandoval, a guy that can't get on the field, and when he's on the field, he's not productive. That sets teams back because you have to. You're either paying the guy to sit on the bench or be hurt, or you're paying him to not be on your team, and it comes down to that. Just like Anthony Rendon, like you're paying Anthony Rendon to play 20 games a year, and you can't afford to do any. You can't afford to get a player that actually will play for you, and it's definitely a concern. I think it's not something teams obviously want to go through, but there's obviously risk to every free agent you sign, and I think it's how much money are you willing to commit to risking, and how much are you willing to, you know, put into this small, whatever the percentage is of him not being able to perform for us. How much are you willing to put yourself back? Because let's say like Shohei's not going to be. I don't think Shohei will be a waste of money by any means, but it's, the Dodgers obviously had to consider, like, he's not pitching for us right now.
Yeah.
He's not going to pitch for us probably for a year and a half.
Hmm.
Um, does that change our monetary view of him because of what he can't provide to us uh, in the immediate future? So it's definitely a concern. I think as a Red Sox fan, I've seen it firsthand many times. Carl Crawford, Pablo Sandoval, even Adrian Gonzalez, I guess. It's yeah,
Yeah.
so it's tough, and I think that's why we praised the Braves so much, because even after Acuna got his salary, and he tore his ACL, it's like, yeah, like, he's out for the year, sucks, but we're not paying him $50 million this year.
Yeah.
So we don't have this massive hole of money that's going nowhere. So, um, yeah, I guess that's my thoughts on that. Couple more free agents. Obviously, we have Shota Amanga coming out of Japan. I think he's probably going to end up with the Giants. Giants are going to go out and sign two international free agents. Um, I don't think Jung Hoo Lee will be, anything crazy. I think he'll be a very good hitter. Um, I don't think he's not to the level of any of the other Japanese import. Well, he's Korean, but any of the other international signings this year. And then the Red Sox, interestingly enough, listening to Yoshida trade offers.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I was surprised to hear that as well. I mean, I think ultimately, um, yeah, I know the Giants are going to continue. You can just tell that they want to do something big, and I think ultimately in that they're a sneaky big market team in the sense that they can do something like that as well. And I think they'd rather go and get maybe some of that international talent versus like a Snell or something along those lines, just based on what we've seen them do in the past. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the potential Red Sox trade there and how you're feeling about that.
Well, so they're listening to Kenley too. I wouldn't mind the Kenley one, just because the bullpen got a lot better last year. Kenley was great for us, and I think Kenley can still be a good pitcher. But 16 million for the next 2 years uh, is a lot, and I think there's something there to dump
Yeah.
that's worth dumping. Yoshida doesn't make sense to me, because you commit all this money. Obviously, and it was more of a Heim thing than a Breslow thing, I guess. But you were willing to commit that amount of money for a 30-year-old Japanese player, and now you're not. So I don't know, and that I think trading him would also be a bad look for any future Japanese player that you want to try and get. What the president you're sending to these Japanese players is like, oh yeah, we'll sign you for a year, then trade. Like, that's not something you want to do. Obviously, Yoshida chose Boston for a reason over the other 30 teams. It's not like he got drafted by them. It's a very big difference, right? Like, you have these players that are choosing locations to go to, and especially for these Japanese players, like, they're really choosing because, you know, coming to a completely different country, a lot of them would like to stay West Coast. Obviously, I think that's one of the bigger reasons Shohei and Yamamoto signed with the Dodgers, closest as you can get to Japan, well, outside of Hawaii, obviously. But I think that's a major impact. You're going all the way to the farthest point in the U.S. you possibly can to go, play baseball, which obviously is great in itself, but you're changing your entire life for it. And I think
Yeah.
trading after a year, especially after a very good year, just sets a bad precedent. And I hope they don't do it. I understand needing to dump some salary, which is a whole different conversation. I don't think the Red Sox are a team that needs to dump salary, but uh, yeah, I'm not a fan of it. I think as many reservations that I
Yeah.
have about Yoshida in the long run, it's just not worth it right now in the immediate future. There's really no upside to it
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good
Yep,
point
maybe
about,
that's what they
any
are.
potential signings down the line, especially, I mean, the Red Sox are, big market team. I mean, there's going to be opportunities for them, in the future to get those guys. And if you kind of, to your point, it's like a college football coach. If you're going in and, saying all this stuff and then you don't act that way, I mean, in the future, people aren't going to
Hmm.
believe you. And like you're saying, it's a whole different life. And, you're not necessarily as close as you could be as you are on the West Coast. So, yeah, I get that. I've heard and seen different things that, yeah, the Red Sox are acting almost like a small market team, which I'm
Yeah,
curious to
right.
see on that. I mean, we'll see. Ultimately, I guess people are in the positions that they are for a reason, so maybe they got something up their sleeve. That would be my assumption there. But ultimately, it has been interesting to see that. And yeah, I mean, I think especially if somebody like Yamamoto hits, right, if he
Hmm.
comes out and he's like dominant, then I think we're gonna continue to see these Japanese ball players or Korean ball players come over and be some of the hottest commodities in free agency. I saw that Yu Darvish was super disappointed with the Padres because that was like his ultimate goal as well. Was like, I want to build the Japanese super team over here, and nobody even tried. So now, if you're the Padres, right, and you got Darvish on your team, and obviously Darvish is probably going to tell, all of his friends like, yeah, man, I
Yeah.
wanted you here. They didn't even try. So
Well, that will wrap this episode up. Hopefully, we get to talk about some more free agent news next month on our next episode. Hopefully, everything is wrapped up by then, and we get to look forward to spring training, see kind of how lineups are looking, and discuss that. But yeah, this has been a fun offseason for baseball. We haven't had anything like this in a bit. There's been some massive sweepstakes for some big name players, and it's been fun to follow along. So, obviously, want to thank Justin for being here with me, and we will catch you next time.